The reality we live in can be a very strange place. Most of the time, fact being stranger than fiction. How will we ever start to understand this reality we live in unless we question everything? Join me and a guest as we unravel the mysteries of this reality, one topic at a time. This is Inquiries of Our Reality with Shayn Jones.
What is up, Inquirers, and welcome back to yet another mind-bending episode of Inquiries of Our Reality. I'm the one that they call Shane, and today for you guys, I have a return guest, actually, who definitely dives into research from a totally different perspective than most people, and at least what we're discussing today, I know most of you have seen out there, The Shining. And of course, most of you out there are probably somewhat familiar with Stanley Kubrick, but have you guys actually put together all of the predictive programming and MK Ultra type concepts that are hidden within The Shining? I assume no, because today's guest has definitely done the backing and research for that, and he actually has a brand new documentary breaking this down and discussing it, but he of course comes on the show today, breaks down a bunch of different concepts, and we of course dive into a lot of the real hidden concepts behind what Stanley Kubrick was trying to portray in The Shining. But before we get into this ultra fascinating episode today, we of course have to do some quick updates and front of house stuff. First and foremost, I am trying to put together an investigation team for the Metro Detroit / Michigan area. I want to make it so that I can go out on monthly investigations, diving into cryptids, ufology, the paranormal, anything that happens to come our way as far as an investigation goes. So, of course, with that, I'm trying to look for diversity with this team as far as having a bunch of different types of researchers and investigators. So, if you feel like you might be interested in that team and you might be somewhat within driving distance of the Detroit area to possibly make it out to some monthly investigations, then you guys can go and fill out the application, which is down as a Google form in the show description. Should be all the way up at the top, and I should hopefully be announcing those as soon as I get a little bit of a stockpile going for those, but definitely something I want to get into the works, so make sure you guys check that out if you guys are interested, of course. And the next piece of news and updates that I wanted to share is that I want to try to add a lot more diversity as far as topics go on this show. In the beginning, I was diving into a lot of different stuff, kind of accompanying the name Inquiries of Our Reality as a whole, but it seems like as time's gone on, I've kind of fell into the corner of primarily just covering creatures and cryptids and UFOs and all that kind of stuff more so than anything. But with that, I want to expand, again, the topics that are talked about in the show more. So if you're somebody that possibly has a bizarre experience or encounter you'd like to share, somebody that possibly does research on fringe topics and or conspiracies, you possibly are a spiritual teacher or dive into some type of philosophy, you enjoy digging into folklore and or family stories, or you research ancient civilizations or hidden history, or possibly even have some background and understanding of the occult and secret societies. If any of those, or you have any other open-minded topics that you guys would like to come on the show and discuss, please get a hold of me, because I would love to, again, be able to expand the topic base on this show and make it so that we can get some more variety as far as Inquiries of Our Reality goes. But before we get into the show, just a quick message. This podcast has a strong focus on community engagement, so I encourage all listeners to share their own experiences and research on the show. That said, if anyone would like to be a guest on the show, or if anybody has an encounter or experience that they would like to share on the show, or possibly even have me investigate, you guys can get a hold of me through email, which is inquiriesofourrealitypodcast@outlook.com, or you guys give the hotline a call or text, and that number is 313-364-1551. And every single thing that I mentioned is all available in the link tree, which is available down in the show description. And with that, let's get into the show. Please welcome back to the show, for now his third return, Ryder Lee. Welcome to the show, man.
How's it going, my friend? Thanks for having me on again. Third time's the charm, baby.
Always a pleasure to have you on, man. You always bring a new perspective on a lot of really interesting information. Like the first time you came on, episode 144, if anybody wants to check it out, I believe that one we got into UFO cults. And then I believe the second one was the one where we started getting into like the origin of UFOs and how it's all partially like a government psyop. And that was episode 197 if anybody wants to check that out. So as always, man, you always bring some awesome information. You bring a lot of information to back up what you're saying. And of course, you just have a totally different perspective on it, man. So it's always a pleasure to dive into whatever research you're getting into.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that a lot. And because some people don't like it, but it is what it is. I'm not going to change the way that I do things. And yeah, we got a new documentary out now called A Clockwork Shining on Amazon Prime and Apple TV Plus. Hopefully, we get a link in the description so people can easily get access to it. And what had happened was me and Jay Widener, we started doing, shows together and stuff. And he had already previously done 2 movies on Kubrick called A Kubrick's Odyssey 1 and Kubrick's Odyssey 2. And this subtitle of this new documentary that I've done is A Clockwork Shining, A Kubrick's Odyssey 3. So it's
kind of throwing all 3 of the names in there all at once. I dig it.
a quasi sequel to, because he was supposed to do a 3rd movie that never got developed. He never got to come to fruition. So we decided to just tag that, that tagline on the end of this one as like a 3rd installment of that trilogy series that he started a long time ago. And I was bringing him on my show, and I was like, hey, man, which I've always kind of been a Stanley Kubrick fan. I've always been a fan of film. I've always loved movies just in general. Like, it's an art form,
And how deep he does his movies, too, is like a whole other level. Like, there's so much symbology within his movies. Like, that dude, he has like I don't remember exactly what the number was, but I've always heard he had like a ridiculously high IQ, too.
Yeah, he was a master chess player. He loved playing chess, and normally people that play chess have a really high IQ because of strategy and all kinds of other different factors. So I watched his first 2 documentaries on the subject, and I was bringing him on my show, and I was like, well, I got to find something within this movie that no one has ever seen before. And I started watching it, and I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm starting to get the inkling that something is not right about the movie. And I had seen the movie several times before, and to be honest, I never really liked it. I thought that The Shining was kind of boring, but at that time I didn't really understand exactly what was going on within the movie. It wasn't until I watched it several times in a row that I was like, this is a masterpiece. Like he's not only symbolically is he telling you all this stuff, the way that it's filmed is just magnificent. There's really not too many films that are, made nowadays that are filmed the way that Stanley Kubrick filmed his movies. It's all has a bunch of jump cuts in them and things that keep the attention of the audience in like a normal movie. I mean, with the documentary, it's different because you have to keep that person's attention no matter what. So you have to be switching things on screen a lot. But within like a regular standard movie, you shouldn't have to do that every 5 seconds, but it's become this shaky cam type of thing in like action sequences and stuff. And it's just a garbled up mess, which a lot of movies do. And a lot of problems with movies nowadays as well is like they give away the entire plot of the movie within the dialogue of the characters, which,
I mean, even in the trailer, you see that a lot, where you can pretty much get everything that's going to happen in the movie besides just scenes you want to see, but you can get the whole plot within the 2-minute trailer nowadays.
Yeah, and that's a travesty. Like that's that's wrecking the entire movie. Like the movie Longlegs, I thought was pretty good, but they ruined it at the end of the movie where they explained everything that was going on. There wasn't any mystery to it anymore. And then also with the new movie that I just watched, which was Smile 2, they did that exact same thing at the end of Smile 2. And I'm like, why are they doing this? Like, it makes the first hour of the movie completely irrelevant.
Do you think it's a matter of they don't see people as intelligent when it comes to movie watching as they used to, where like nowadays people want everything handed to them versus like, you know, movies back in the day where people can almost form like multiple opinions or perspectives. It's like reading a book. Like you can watch a movie and you can view it in 3 different ways, but it's like nowadays people don't like that movie style where it's up for interpretation. They want to know the exact answer. So in turn, it's like you lose a lot of the creativity and a lot of the fun within the film when you have to give everybody every single piece instead of having them figure it out for themselves, because then you get into the whole like side where everybody argues on the internet of like, oh, was this the intention? Oh, was this the intention? And it's like, that stuff's fun to discuss for a movie, but people are like, they want those set answers nowadays, you know?
They do, and that's the most ridiculous part of it. And that's what Stanley Kubrick was trying to, he would never really do that with any of his movies. He wanted the audience to create their own interpretation of what the movie was about. That's why he didn't do very many interviews. Because he didn't want to tell the audience exactly what the movie was about, because then that ruins the mystery and ruins the interpretation that the audience could possibly have and any theories of what they could possibly have about what the movie's actually about. And there's and that's been done over and over and over again. Like these filmmakers treat the audience as if they're stupid and that they can't put 2 and 2 together on their own and create their own ideas of what it's about. And I think that they do that on purpose because people don't want to think. They just want to kind of sit back and be entertained, which I don't disagree with that either. I mean, there's a time and a place for everything. I like watching entertaining movies as well, like stupid, action movies or, whatever. But I also like to think with my movies, and I like to sit down and be shocked by something and put something together completely on my own and make that realization. And there's so many movies now that are they'll have that entire setup and the mystery established, and then you'll be thinking like, what's really going on here? What's happening? And then at the end of the movie, toward the end, they explain all of it within the dialogue of the characters. Like this literally happened in Longlegs, and it happened in Smile 2. And spoilers for Smile 2, the entire movie is basically in this lady's head, right? But they tell you that at the end of the movie.
Side note, not to get too far off into another side tangent, but a very well done movie that I feel like you would definitely appreciate because it's an extremely deep movie, and every time I watch it, you start understanding totally different levels of it. The Platform 1 and 2, those ones are like great. Fantastic. And even at the end, they do exactly the opposite of what you're saying, where it's all left up for interpretation of what exactly does the end of that movie mean. Like that, fantastically done. It's like, I don't get to talk about movies very often, but that movie is so deep that I always just got to give a shout out whenever I get into these types of conversations talking about a very well done film.
I love The Platform, and I also like Cadu Lake. If people haven't seen Cadu Lake on HBO, which was produced by M. Night Shyamalan, it's probably the best movie that he's been a part of. He didn't direct it. He directed Trap, which was another new movie on HBO. But Cadu Lake, phenomenal movie. It doesn't tell you anything. It shows you. And you have to... after I was done watching it, I was like literally laying in bed. I couldn't go to sleep until I figured the thing out.
That was like me with Platform, man. Like, there's so much symbology within that movie. Like, I don't know if you saw the second one, but there's a part where the one guy who wants redemption puts the blanket on and catches it on fire and then falls down the hole. And it's like stuff like that. You interpret it as like the phoenix, that, he's rising from the ashes to make up for like his sins that he committed. And it's just stuff like that, man, is so deep that I feel like 99% of people that watch movies like that just like don't pick up on subtle hints like that because it's just too symbolic. They're just like, all right, the guy tried to kill himself. That's it.
Yeah, and there's normally a lot more meaning behind, especially someone like with Stanley Kubrick. He put a lot of meaning and a lot of symbolic things within his movies so that people could, interpret it on their own. And each time they would rewatch their movies, they would find something new. And that's definitely the case with The Shining. It is a multifaceted, multi-layered movie that hooks people in really quickly. And it establishes the mystery. And there's so many holes and so many plot holes within The Shining, and also, continuity errors within the movie that has never really been answered.
Do you think it's purposeful, considering that the type of person he was?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that as these continuity errors are happening, it's happening within the subconscious of the viewer to take them down to have them start questioning their reality as Jack is also questioning his reality within the movie. So it's like, it's not only happening within the movie that you're watching, it's also subliminally and subconsciously happening to the viewer as they're watching the movie. I mean, The Shining is a really uneasy type of movie, not only with the visuals but along with the soundtrack and the actors within the movie. It gives you that creepy, eerie feeling whenever you're watching it, and like something isn't right about this movie. Something is and that's really portrayed through a lot of the continuity errors, which we're going to have some slides to show here a little bit later on about a lot of these continuity errors, because there's so many of them throughout The Shining, and some of them are so hidden that it's very difficult to see on your first time through, or even your second, or even your 10th time. Like, you'd have to watch this thing a lot of times to find some of these more subtle continuity errors, which we point out within the movie. And then we also point out ones that people have seen before within our movie, to also establish how these, what the continuity errors are actually about within our movie. But Kubrick, in being a genius filmmaker as he is, we've come to the conclusion that this movie is an experiment. It's an experiment not only on the audience that's watching it with all these errors and these continuity errors, but it's an experiment on the actors as well. And it's an experiment in the way that Stanley Kubrick is writing the movie, because he's rewriting the entire script as the movie is being filmed, which no one in their right mind, no film director would ever do that. That's going to be a freaking disaster.
Do you think it's maybe intentional for the actors so that they are always on edge and they can't just like get comfortable? They kind of have to act with what they're thrown at last second, because it's like they got too much time to practice, and he probably wants that like authentic feeling of just being thrown into something, right?
Well, that would be the case if I don't think that Kubrick was doing this on any other of his movies. It seems like this was the only movie that he was completely rewriting the entire movie as it was being filmed. But that could be the case with The Shining, because it got so annoying for Jack Nicholson that he just stopped reading the script. He would only read the printouts that Stanley Kubrick would type up for him every day, because they were always changing. So that is definitely a huge inconvenience. And what we can do right now is just go ahead and watch the trailer for A Clockwork Shining, which is on Amazon Prime and Apple TV Plus, to give you guys a good idea of exactly what this movie's about. Here it is, the official trailer for A Clockwork Shining.
The buildings behind me were the headquarters for the World War II Office of Strategic Service. It was here that the first halting steps toward mind control began.
So 10 years before Stanley Kubrick made The Shining, he made another film. It was a film about mind control called Clockwork Orange.
The Shining is one movie that has really been put through the ringer, and one thing that people really don't notice, that doesn't really make a lot of sense.
All during the shoot, Kubrick is rewriting the movie.
What we see here is Stanley Kubrick trying to encode a secret meaning into The Shining that he doesn't want anyone to know about.
Kubrick has several references to Freemasonry in his films.
There's a lady that walks past that has a bloody handprint on her ass.
The Shining is Kubrick's 11th film, and there's 11s all through the film. 11 is a special number in occult theology.
The Shining has been regarded as one of the greatest horror films ever made. But is it really a horror film?
The Shining also is loaded with sexual innuendo.
The family is isolated up at the Overlook, which is a perfect opportunity for some sort of CIA experimentation to go down up there.
Using MK Ultra methods, psychiatrically control assassins. Literally assassins.
Experimental drugs, including LSD, were administered to human guinea pigs. The patients were never told that their treatment was part of a CIA experiment.
And there is this story which involves him spiking the drinks of one of his deputies, this guy Frank Olson. and he jumped out of a window to his death.
It's a demonic possession, you know, so it makes someone feel like they don't have any control over this etherical entity outside themselves, when really it's the people who are imposing the trauma that need to be held accountable for the actions.
Mr. Thomas.
We know what happened in the apartment that they had.
There are many clues that point to the fact that this theory of what The Shining is really about is the correct theory.
We think that we're watching a horror movie where ghosts are kind of forcing a man to go off and kill his family. But what are we really watching here?
Wendy, I'm home.
Hold on tight, everyone. Inquiries of Our Reality will be right back after this brief commercial break. But if you don't mind taking a second to follow Inquiries of Our Reality on Instagram and Facebook, and Open Minds Media on YouTube and TikTok, I'd greatly appreciate it. And feel free to spark up a conversation. I love getting to know you guys. And now back to the show.
So that gives you a better idea of what the movie is about. We have several people also in the movie, including me and Jay Widener. As you saw, we had Mark Devlin, which is an author and researcher. We had Kathy O'Brien, Monarch, MK Ultra, Survivor. We have AFOSI, Special Agent of the Air Force, Walter Bosley in there. And then we also have Joseph Atwell, which is an author and researcher in our movie.
Wow, just off that trailer, man, like, I'm already absolutely fascinated by this, and I already want to break this down as much as possible, but I feel like we kind of need to build up to The Shining to kind of give people a little bit more of a background on Kubrick as far as the timeline goes for everything too, because I'm sure you break down some of the other stuff in the movie that people may be semi-familiar with, like some of the symbolism and stuff in it, but of course, kind of diving into Stanley Kubrick, just to kind of give people a vast idea of his movies. I mean, his most popularized movies was 2001: A Space Odyssey, as you'd mentioned, which leads into a lot of conspiracies involving the moon landing, which leeways into a lot of the stuff with The Shining that, people may not have picked up a lot of the MK Ultra stuff originally, which fascinating new way of looking at it, because I kind of knew it in the back of my head, but I never thought about it that way because I was too focused on all of the weird little possible I faked the lunar landing scenes that they put in it. So I overlooked a lot of the message from The Shining because I haven't seen it in a long time. But I mean, connecting it with everything else too, A Clockwork Orange, extremely occult, dives into MK Ultra, and then Eyes Wide Shut, diving into the elites and all of the stuff that's happening behind the scenes. So it's this guy definitely has a track record of some type of involvement. Wondering if it's from the perspective of him trying to release information, or if it's from the perspective of trying to make people subconsciously aware so that he can do this programming. Because diving into The Shining and all the stuff that you were kind of somewhat mentioning in that trailer, I mean, that would have obviously fell after 2001 and when he supposedly went into the lunar landing stuff, which again kind of connects in with a lot of the symbolism that's within The Shining. But I mean, at that point, it kind of makes you wonder if, one, he was trying to expose things, or two, if he was compromised and he was more than willing to run these experiments. And maybe, again, kind of talking about a perspective, and maybe you kind of break this down a little bit. Maybe there was a period where he was doing some of these government experiments, and then towards the end, maybe he started to regret some of this stuff, because there's a lot of stories about his deathbed confessions. But Eyes Wide Shut being one of his last movies that seems to call out all of the elites, almost kind of seems like maybe he was trying to air something out. But I know I said a lot there, kind of ranting on about it, but kind of hop in, I guess, with some of your perspective on what I said.
Well, it depends on who you talk to, who thinks that Kubrick is what, and that's a really loaded question. We do provide evidence within our documentary. I mean, the documentary is almost 2 hours long, so that was a 3-minute trailer. That's just a little snippet of things that are within the movie. You would really have to watch the entire thing to get the full analysis of what I'm getting ready to say. But we provide evidence that Kubrick was involved with the government, and that comes in the form of documentation that is in our movie. We know that Kubrick was working with these intelligence agencies, just purely based off of whenever he was filming Doctor Strangelove. Many people have talked about this before, but it's still really interesting. He asked the Air Force if he could get what the inside of a B-2 stealth bomber looked like. The Air Force denied him, and then he went to his production designer and was like, "Hey, how can we create the accurate depiction of what the inside of a B-2 stealth bomber is without actually having what the inside of a B-2 stealth bomber looks like?" So he clipped out all this stuff from a magazine and he put it all together, and then they built their set. And then later on, the military came to visit Stanley Kubrick on the set of Doctor Strangelove, and they were very shocked by the accuracy of what the inside of the B-52 looked like. And we actually have the interview of his production designer in the movie A Clockwork Shining on Amazon Prime, where he's describing that Kubrick called him in the middle of the night and was like, "Hey, you better have all your resources and how you figured out what the inside of this B-52 looks like, or we're going to be investigated by the FBI." And also, there were credits at the end of 2001: A Space Odyssey that was later removed, where Kubrick was thinking like DARPA, Air Force Intelligence, Langley, Virginia, like all these intelligence agencies, and they were later removed. And I would say it's a pretty good theory that probably he had those names of those intelligence communities and all these the military agents that helped him with his film with 2001: A Space Odyssey in there, and then someone seen it from some of these departments and was like, hey, you can't be thanking us in the credits of this movie. Like, people can't know that we were a part of this movie at all, but now it's kind of become, through FOIA requests, which we also show in the movie, the military's involvement in the production of certain movies. Transformers movie, Die Another Day, all had military involvement within the production of the movie. So now it's kind of more commonplace. But back in, when did Space Odyssey come out? In 1968. When it came out in 1968, the military involvement with these projects were no one knew that they were involved. So
I mean, look at Star Trek, and I mean, even look at the gap from what they were able to do visually for Star Trek versus 2001: A Space Odyssey, and those came out the same year. I mean, it seems like all these sci-fi shows that were coming out around that time had a lot of predictive programming in them.
A lot, and it seems like too that, I mean, when you were bringing up the faking of the moon landing earlier, that's what Jay Weidner's original 2 films was pretty much about. Kubrick's Odyssey 1 and 2 was about Kubrick faking the moon landing, but this movie has nothing to do with the faking of the moon landing. This isn't any way, shape, or form really related at all, other than it has Jay Weidner in the movie, and we do mention briefly his other movies and about the faking of the moon landing, which takes up probably a runtime of like 2 minutes in the entire movie. So this isn't a rehashing of the Kubrick faking the moon landing. If you want Kubrick faking the moon landing stuff, go watch his previous 2 Kubrick's Odyssey movies. This is something brand new. This is something that no one has ever heard before and no one has ever talked about before. It's something that I found and something that I created, and it's based off of my theory. So, but his prior 2 films really delved into, Kubrick faking the moon landing and Danny standing up in the hallway and the carpet pattern looking like the launch pad of Apollo, the Apollo shuttle to the moon, and Danny having the Apollo 11 shirt on, and then he goes into room 237, which at that time, 237,000 miles away was what people thought the distance between the Earth and the moon was. So, and then Kubrick changed the number from Stephen King's novel, which was originally 217, and that could have been a reason why he changed it to, room 237. So but the theory that we discussed within A Clockwork Shining doesn't discount any of those other theories.
Just to throw this part in, since you're kind of leading up to that scene when he looks into the room, that's the part where there's the guy in the rabbit suit, correct?
No, that is Wendy later on in the movie, toward the end of the movie, where she essentially has been heavily traumatized by Jack trying to kill her with an axe. And then she goes upstairs and she sees the man in the bear costume, which is, I have it in some slides here that we can show later on, which our movie really explains like what these scenes actually are and why they're in there.
Is that because that's not in the book, right? Because I'd never actually read the Shining book, and I'd heard that some of these parts weren't in it, but I've never read it myself, so I don't know which scenes are in the book and not in the movie.
Kubrick makes so many adjustments between Stephen King's novel and the actual the movie that he filmed, and he changed a lot of things. He essentially took all the paranormal stuff and all the ghostly stuff out of the movie. I mean, there's nothing that can really be considered paranormal in The Shining other than the ball inexplicably rolling toward Danny whenever he stands up on the carpet, and the door to the storage room opening and letting Jack out of the storage room, which we also talk about in the movie, which is when Halloran is giving them a tour. There's so many foreshadowing events within The Shining that people really, it's kind of difficult to notice, but pretty much Halloran is giving a tour to Wendy and Danny through the kitchen, and he's setting up all these, the plot points. He shows her the storage room, but when he shows Wendy and Danny the storage room, it doesn't sound like he says the storage room. It sounds like he says the story room. Now, this is the story room. And it's just a coincidence that at that point in the movie, whenever Wendy hits Jack over the head with a baseball bat and then drags him into the story room, that's when everything takes this weird and strange type of turn. And Grady is talking to Jack outside of the story room and basically telling him to, kill Wendy and Danny. And before that, it was more like a persuasion, because when whenever Jack first meets Grady, which is in the gold room the second time, and he spills the alcohol on Grady, and then they go to the bathroom to try and wipe it off, he's kind of like hinting at Jack, like, you should, Danny's becoming a real problem. You should correct them the way that I corrected my two daughters and my wife. And later, whenever he's in the story room, he says, I don't think you have the guts to do this. I and others believe that you don't have what it takes to actually go through with this. So he's basically egging Jack on to kill his family.
Is the story room supposed to basically represent because obviously this is diving into like mind control and MK Ultra type stuff. Is that supposed to like represent some type of like chamber where they would try to run these mind control experiments? I don't know exactly if there's like a specific name for like the type of like interrogation room or whatever you want to call it that they would have like conducted some of these experiments in. But is that like what that's supposed to represent? Is like the stories that they put in your head in this room?
Yeah, we keep that really open-ended because, again, I want the audience to, create their own ideas of exactly what's happening. And that is a really good interpretation because that's the exact same type of facility or room that they would a lot of these Army personnel would be locked inside of in some of the first MK Ultra experiments that happened in the United States, and they would be dosed with a drug called BZ, which is 100 times more powerful than LSD, and then they would go out of their minds and they would be locked in this room where they would have a doctor in there that was asking them all these weird questions, which those first experiments really weren't necessarily mind control experiments, but they were experimentations on certain types of drugs, and the Army personnel weren't told what they were going to be experimented on. They would come in, they would have this mask put over their face, and then they would get this aerosol, and they would be told to inhale this aerosol gas, which was BZ. And they would even do simulations, like battle simulations, like out in the field of like, tests of, and then they would take these giant barrels of BZ and they would just open up the barrels and let the aerosol wipe over the field where all the army test subjects were. And then they would be completely out of their mind and they wouldn't be able to walk around. So then the other people would have to go out and get them off of the field and take them into the test rooms and ask them all these questions. Like it's all that stuff is really verifiable, which we go through also in our documentary. All these instances between what's happening in The Shining and things that have happened in real life. I mean, we know with Frank Olson and Sidney Gottlieb, Frank Olson was unknowingly dosed with LSD, and then he later jumped out of his hotel room and killed himself. And there's so many things that Kubrick talks about that mimic real life. And we even get into his earlier works like Lolita and Sue Lyon and the things that happened to Sue Lyon during the filming of Lolita, which Lolita is basically about pedophilia. And, an older man sleeping with a very underage girl, and that exact same thing that she's making a movie about is happening to her in real life on the set of Lolita with James B. Harris, which was Kubrick's producer. He was doing the same thing to her in real life as that was she was portraying on screen during the filming of the movie. And there's other things like Clockwork Orange as well, had real life implications. Whenever it was released overseas in the UK and some other countries abroad, crime skyrocketed after the movie was released. Like there was even crime. They were called the Clockwork Murderers. Like in the film, it ended up being pulled from a lot of different countries. And then you have like the things with The Shining with Shelley Duvall, and the way that Stanley Kubrick treated Shelley Duvall on the set of the movie seems an awful lot like what somebody would experience in the traumatic abuse that they would go through, in one of these programs, in one of these mind control programs.
Hold on, guys. We have to take a break to pay some bills. But if you don't like hearing the ads, then I have a solution for you. You can get ad-free and early access to this show and Bizarre Encounters with Shayn Orin on the Open Minds Media Patreon for just $1 a month. It's a great way to support the show and all the hard work behind it. And if you're interested in merch store discounts or video versions of the show, then there are a few other tiers with additional benefits with 7-day free trials available. And we are back, so let's hop right in. I'm glad that you brought that up because this was another thing that I was about to connect. So I've talked to a handful of people that have gone through MK Ultra programs, and they talk about this whole, again, trauma-based mind control, where part of it is usually like if you get closely connected to somebody or you have feelings for somebody, like they'll make you hurt that person. In some cases, I've even heard like murder that person. So, I mean, that could be where it kind of plays back into this whole concept behind like, why is Jack trying to murder his family throughout the whole thing? Is it one to try to show how far they could potentially push somebody, or on the other side, is it showing the whole concept of trauma-based mind control that they try to separate you emotionally from everybody so that they can have full control over you to do whatever they want you to do? And I've heard this in the case of people that have been like honeypots and who've had to do these really disgusting things with, like older men and stuff like that. And the people who have done things like silent killing, where I've had Nathan Reynolds come on the show and talk about that a bit, but there always seems to be this thing where there's this trauma separation from family, from people that you care about. So I'm assuming that that's part of the interpretation of it, is that they're trying to get him to kill his family so then they can use that trauma-based mind control to have him emotionally separated to basically push him into, I guess some people might call like a super soldier type program. If you have no remorse, no anything, and you're able to essentially go up, murder somebody and not feel anything about it because you've already murdered somebody that close to you. Which also kind of ties in with a lot of occult, ritualistic type ideas. And of course, there's two interpretations on that, whether or not it's actually magic or it's on the side that I usually tend to be on, that I think it's just a very advanced understanding of psychology. And it's so advanced to the point where we call it magic, or we look at it like it's magic, but it's not magic. It's just a master understanding of psychology and how to break down the human mind.
That's right. And it's basically explained in the very beginning of the movie between the doctor and Wendy, whenever the doctor comes to visit Wendy and Danny in their apartment in Boulder, Colorado, that Danny pretty much developed these psychic abilities based on the trauma that he suffered at the hands of Jack, which is another part of this entire MK Ultra stuff, is that at least a handful, 4 to 5 sub-projects of the ones that we know about, of the 149 sub-projects that are still available, which there were said to have been several more of them that were destroyed and burned. But out of the ones that we know about, there were at least 4 to 5 MK Ultra sub-projects that were dedicated to the research of psychic abilities. And how do you unlock those abilities? You would unlock those abilities through trauma. And that's pretty much what has happened to Danny, because Wendy explains, which there's a dialogue error. There's not only continuity errors with objects being removed that were not previously there and then appearing, which we're going to get into here in a little bit with these slides, but there's also a lot of dialogue error within The Shining as well. And one of those dialogue errors happens within two of them actually happen in the first 10 minutes of the movie. And one of them is when Wendy is talking to the doctor, and she says that whenever Jack came in and hurt Danny's arm, that's basically when Danny started developing these types of abilities, and that happened 5 months ago, and Jack has been sober ever since. So that is establishing that Jack has been sober for 5 months. And then later, whenever Jack is telling Grady and verifying the story that he actually injured Danny's arm, Jack says that it happened 3 years ago. So there's all of these. There's not only the stuff with things missing and disappearing and reappearing, or things that appear that were never there, or things that are disappearing that was there before. There's also a lot of continuity errors between the dialogue of the characters. And another one is in the first 10 minutes of the movie, when Ullman is explaining to Jack, the process of the job, which is another really interesting part of this entire movie, because Ullman pretty much sets up the rest of the movie just in the dialogue between Jack and Ullman. In the movie, he says that, this isn't a physically demanding job. This is a psychological job. This is because you're isolated up here, the isolation. And then, what other types of programs use isolation to control their subjects? I mean, there's an entire Kubrick CIA counterintelligence manual that you can get the book of on freaking Amazon that talks all about this and how they would torture people to get information. They would use sensory deprivation and isolation on them. And which is another clue that this entire thing that's going on up at the Overlook is an experiment. It's an experiment on Jack, and it's an experiment on his family. But whenever Ullman looks a lot like JFK as well, which I think was also on purpose, as JFK was a big fan of Stanley Kubrick. He actually watched Spartacus at the White House. Stuart Ullman, within the dialogue between him and Jack, Ullman says that the previous caretaker was named Charles Grady. And then later, whenever Jack is face to face with Grady in the bathroom, he calls himself what does he call himself? Delbert Grady. Sorry, I had a blank there. So Ullman says that the former caretaker was Charles Grady, and then whenever Grady is actually introducing himself to Jack inside of the bathroom, he calls himself Delbert Grady. So there's 2 different things going on here. And it's so interesting because Kubrick had a lot of people working for him. He had an entire team of people around him, all the time, doing all this research. So all of these continuity errors and all these dialogue errors would have had to have gone in front of several people. So really the only explanation that they're there on purpose, that he's put all of these in there on purpose to affect the subconscious mind of the viewer.
Just to kind of play into some of this too, kind of playing devil's advocate a little bit, considering you dive into a lot of this stuff, are you familiar with the whole Grateful Dead connection with the show that never happened?
No, I was never a fan of the Grateful Dead. Some people can hate me or whatever. I never got into them. I don't know anything about them at all.
So supposedly there's a lot of conspiracy that kind of gets based around the Grateful Dead, with them being connected to the CIA and doing all these mind control experiments. And of course, they were like the LSD thing. So like people getting dosed in the audience and running different psychological experiments. But one of the things that I've had somebody come on and talk about a while ago was this show that never happened, where they supposedly worked with the CIA and basically convinced everybody that this show happened and people had memories of this happening. And they went there and they were telling stories about this, but none of it ever actually happened. The show never happened. When the show supposedly happened, one of the band members that was supposed to have been there was already dead, and they left these like little pieces of things in there to see if people would catch this stuff. And when you start diving into this stuff, I mean, everybody wants to look at these people like, they're doing something evil, but I mean, even kind of going on to Kubrick's account, I mean, if you're a vastly intelligent person and you have these connections to run psychological experiments, I don't even necessarily think it's from like an evil means, but rather just if you're an intelligent person, you have the means to do this. Like, you're just curious for yourself to see like what you can bend the human mind to do, like psychologically. So, I mean, I feel like he may have been privy to information in this movie, and he was running these psychological experiments for the government, but it was more so out of his own thing rather than him being controlled by the government. And then maybe once he started getting in later on, that's when he started kind of leaving these other types of hints that seem like he's trying to call people out, where when you dig back into his old movies like or like a Clockwork Orange or The Shining, it's like, he's clearly has stuff there, but it seems like it's on the other side that he's basically trying to subconsciously put things in people's minds, like purposefully. And even just like little wording like that, I feel like there's like key trigger words within that you're looking at it like it's a continuity error. And I'm sure you have your theories on like why these things exist, but I'm almost wondering if it's a matter of like, that simple idea that you flash like a certain letter and then you flash another letter later on, just little things like that, subtle hints of like something in the audio that he says one thing and then he says another thing, that it's like leaving these things subconsciously that you're never going to pick up because it's something really, really deep on a psychological level that the government was privy to, gave him access to knowing this information. And then he started testing it out to see if it would work for himself. Just simply out of curiosity, like not necessarily that he was an evil guy or had evil intentions,
Yeah, that Grateful Dead scenario that you just brought up, that's the first time I've ever heard of that, because again, I don't listen to the Grateful Dead. I haven't looked into it at all, but it sounds like that they actually did the show and then they gaslit people into believing that they didn't actually do it, which there's several examples of that. Like, there's this whole town in Wisconsin that people remember that grew up in the area, and then there's like no record of it ever existing. And people are like, what do you mean? Like, I used to go there whenever I was a kid. There was a diner there. There was a freaking post office there and like all that. So that's the same type of scenario. I could definitely see them doing that kind of, it's same with like the Men in Black type stories. You know what I mean? Like, someone will see some kind of strange thing or something weird in the sky, which we get into in our movie too. The Air Force was also running MK Ultra programs and have been running MK Ultra programs since before the CIA and still after the CIA. The CIA just took the fall for it. Pretty much every military branch has done some form of MK Ultra type experimentation, and probably still do up until this very day, but we'll never know about it.
I just have some theories on that, and I'm sure you've kind of dug into it, but I ended up doing an episode on Bizarre Encounters where I started breaking down these different timelines, and it kind of connected in with a lot of like the UFO abduction, where it seemed like there was this period where they were really like putting this into people's minds, and it was the same time around that they were doing a lot of the MK Ultra stuff. So I started connecting a bunch of hints, and not to get too far into it, but basically what I was kind of concluding was that they were using these psychedelic drugs that they were using during the MK Ultra experiments to basically alter people's perceptions so that they can continue these weird experiments, diving into even people having, telekinetic type abilities, because it seems like that always seems to be something that happens after UFO abductions. But I'm convinced at this point that a big portion of UFO abductions are, as I call them, like continued Nazi experiments, that they're doing all of these very deep psychological and physical experiments on people that they wouldn't be able to do above the table, and basically hiding it under the masquerade of UFO abduction, because I can't begin to tell you how many cases I've dived into where one of the victims or one of the one of the people that got abducted basically talks about how when they were on the ship, they'd see like mask lines on certain ones of like the extraterrestrials. And I'm convinced that they were just giving them psychedelic drugs and then basically wearing an alien mask and like messing with these people's perception. And I'm not saying that makes up all the phenomenon, but I do think a heavy portion of the phenomenon is these continued experiments under the mask of extraterrestrials, because then there's not anybody you can blame directly. And if anybody comes out and starts talking about how these aliens are messing with their mind, all this shit, like the average person isn't going to listen because it's already under the geist of, you know, being something extraterrestrial instead of, you know, a soldier with a mask on. And I mean, you even see some of that predictive programming even within X-Files, that there's like a couple of these weird episodes.
Yeah, the amount of people that have seen military people within their abduction experience is wild and crazy. Military officers in military uniforms. You're telling me that these supposed extraterrestrials are like they also have Nazi freaking officers on board? It's just stupid, dude. That's so stupid. And I'm glad that you've also drawn that conclusion, because that conclusion makes the absolute most sense. But what I was mentioning with the Men in Black is like, so pretty much what the Men in Black would do is like when someone would see something strange or something weird, they would show up and then they would question the person and they would be like, oh, hey, like, what did you see? And that in and of itself is an operation. Like if you were to do some sort of operation where you put something in the sky and you wanted to gauge the perceptions of what people thought that they actually saw, then you would go follow up with that person that you thought saw that thing to get their explanation of what they thought that it was.
And then do some weird shit in the process to even throw off that encounter a bit, because there's always the trope of like them acting like they don't know how to use a straw, they don't know how to eat Jello, just little weird shit like that. Again, psychological stuff to mess with people. So it's like, all right, this isn't a government agent, so now you're deflecting somebody trying to come at the government and say you had these people that came, and instead they're going back to like, oh, it was an extraterrestrial, and then nobody's going to listen to them again.
Yep. That's right. That is the type of mind games that has been played on the population for a really long time. Nothing is really what it seems. It's all an experiment, just like what's happening with The Shining. It's an experiment. It's an experiment on Jack and his family up at the Overlook. Ullman pretty much says that from the very beginning of the entire movie. It's an experiment. This is a psychological operation, and the experiment is to try and see if we can get this man to kill his family, just like the other experiments that has happened up at the Overlook. I mean, whenever you see that ending shot to The Shining and the camera pans in and then it drops down and it says that, it has the picture of Jack Nicholson in there, Jack's character, Jack Torrance within The Shining, and it says July 4th, 1921. That's an indication of how long they've been running the experiments up there. It has nothing to do with reincarnation, has nothing to do with him being there before. It's a symbolic gesture to let the audience know that this is one of several experiments that happens during the winter months of whenever this hotel is shut down during the winter season. Every year, we get new people to come up here and we run different types of experiments on them. Some are successful, some are not successful. And that is really explained within the ending, the original ending to The Shining, that Kubrick cut out of the movie. He had a completely different ending to the movie than the famous ending that we all know of today. And in that ending, and how we know that that ending was actually there is because there's still photos of it. There's a script of it. It's all online, and it's also in our movie. And you can read the script of what that end scene actually was. And I don't really want to ruin the entire thing here on the show, but I want people to go and watch our movie. But pretty much that original ending to the movie gave away what the entire movie was about. Between Ullman, because Ullman comes and visits Wendy in the hospital, and he's essentially like, listen, the things that you said they happened up here didn't really happen. We didn't find any evidence of any of this stuff.
And is that intended to be like a cover-up, or is that like they never actually happened, like they were messing with her head in the first place?
that's a cover up. That's 100% a cover up, because then, well, I shouldn't have even brought it up because you're making me explain it.
Sorry, you lay down a rabbit trail. I'm not going to not follow it. I mean, come on now.
You just really have to watch the movie because it really brings everything all together, and what we're theorizing of exactly what The Shining is about. Because people have seen, they get a different interpretation based off of the original ending, that it's all happening inside of Wendy's head, it's all happening inside of Jack. I mean, there's hundreds and thousands of theories on what The Shining is really about: Native American genocide, the Holocaust, the faking of the moon landing. It's all the Jack theory, the Wendy theory, and all that. And really, that's the Jack and Wendy theory is based off of that in scene of the movie. But our interpretation of what The Shining is really about fits in with that ending better than anybody else's explanation of what the movie is about, because it really tells you everything. And that was really the reason that Kubrick cut out that original ending to the movie. Well, that was his excuse, right? That whenever he did the test screenings of it, because there was very few people that actually even seen this original ending, it was only in some of the original test screenings of the movies, when they would, show the movie to test audiences to get their reaction to the movie. Kubrick, whenever he was showing this, the original film, he realized that people were just getting up out of the theater and walking out. They weren't really shocked by it. They weren't like stunned. They didn't sit around and talk with each other, and
because they've been conditioned to be just passive about that kind of shit.
So he sent his editor to the movie theaters to splice the reel exactly where Kubrick told him to splice the reel, and that's how we end up with with the famous ending to The Shining that everybody knows.
I mean, do you think he intentionally did that in the first place? Because again, going into just like how advanced Stanley Kubrick's like intelligence is, I mean, I feel like he's one of those types of people that, again, it's up for interpretation. It's hard to fully like try to understand it, but I almost kind of feel like he would be the type of person that would like leave breadcrumbs, hoping that somebody one day would be able to unfold all of this and get all the information he was trying to say. Because I definitely think that he got involved and he became aware of all this stuff that the government was doing, and I have hope in my heart at least that he was one of those people that was actually trying to expose it. But I mean, talking about all the psyop stuff, I mean, controlled narrative. I mean, I definitely think there's a lot of people that give the impression that they're trying to release information, but really what they're trying to do is muddy the waters a little bit. But I mean, at least on Kubrick's behalf, I kind of feel like he was one of the ones that was like, he couldn't talk openly about anything that he was involved in. So he just left all these breadcrumbs hoping that somebody would figure it out one day after he was gone.
Yeah. And that's a testament to no one really putting all this together until our movie. No one has ever talked about this movie being the way that we have, our theory of exactly what's going on.
And I mean, talk about being hidden in plain sight too, that I feel like, at least from the way you're breaking it down, obviously all of his movies are extremely deep, but this one seems like it's probably one of the deepest movies that he's written, but ironically, it's also his most popular movie. So it's almost like the whole concept of just hiding in plain sight, that the movie that's going to have the most information, you're going to make your most popularized movie so that 99% of the population just looks over it and looks at it like a horror movie. But you'll know that if it's in the eyesight of people that can break it down, again, you're leaving that breadcrumb, hoping that somebody will pick it up.
That's right. And that's what that's really what Joe Atwell talks about within the movie as well. He talks about how, the occulted meaning behind things is meant to be hidden so that whenever somebody comes along and puts all this stuff together, they can discover what the true meaning is, supposed to be. And I think this is a good point to get into the slides that I have here, because this really explains a lot, and we'll be able to dive into a bunch of different things with this as well.
Don't go anywhere, guys. We'll be right back. But just a quick reminder, if you'd like to rock some gear for one of your favorite podcasts, creatures, or topics, hop on over to the Open Minds Media store on Etsy and Printify for a wide range of designs with new drops regularly. The most recent design available is the SQUATCH Country Fear and Loathing parody design, with Sasquatch as Hunter S. Thompson and Mothman as Dr. Gonzo, with artwork by Chris Holm of the Conspire Theory podcast. Welcome back to the show. Now let's dive right in.
Can you see this?
Yep. I was going to say I got a lot of different questions for different scenes in the movie, but I was waiting until you got to this part before I started hitting it too early.
Cool. So, as I was watching the movie over and over again, I was like, well, you know, what am I going to discover in here that people haven't seen before? And as we just seen in that trailer, when Jack stands up in the gold room the second time, there's a lady that walks behind him, and this lady right here, she is actually the one that bumps into Grady and makes him spill the alcohol on Jack. And on the back of her dress, it looks like she has a bloody handprint on her dress. Now, people have refuted this and said that it's not really a handprint, that it's a part of the dress, and well,
it's undeniably a handprint.
like regardless if it's a handprint or if it's put into the dress, is designed to look like a handprint, and we see the evidence with that with another movie which involves Tom Hanks, which is what came out in 2000, Castaway. This is the exact same type of handprint that's on Wilson the volleyball whenever Tom Hanks cuts his hand open as he's trying to make a fire and accidentally puts his bloody handprint on Wilson the volleyball. Is the exact same type of handprint. It's a four-fingered bloody handprint that's on Wilson. It's a four-fingered bloody handprint that's on the back of this lady's dress. Okay, so the freaking haters can back up on that one. You know, there's proof that a bloody handprint can be four fingers because there's one on Wilson the volleyball.
So what's just out of curiosity before we get into the next one, what do you, at least from like your research, what is like the four-fingered handprint supposed to represent? Or have you kind of not quite figured out what exactly the meaning of the four-fingered handprint is? Because obviously it has something to do with numbers, because when it comes to this occult stuff, it's always numbers.
Well, I can tell you what other people think that it is. Other people think that it's some sort of human trafficking symbol, or human traffickers. Some people think that it's some sort of demonic entity that has four fingers. So, I mean, there's really an endless amount of explanations. I just, brought it up because I think that it's interesting and people can create their own interpretation. I mean, we can get into so much stuff surrounding Tom Hanks. So much stuff has come out about him in the last couple of years, but that's a whole other rabbit hole, and we're not really doing a show on Tom Hanks. But if you don't know about Tom Hanks, look into a little bit into Tom Hanks on that one. But
Isaac Happy, just start there. There's a good spot to start.
There you go. That's right. This is one of the ones that one of the continuity errors within The Shining. So whenever Halloran is taking Wendy and Danny with the tour of the Overlook, there's a light switch that's on the top of the wall where this arrow is on this top panel of the photo. And then later on, whenever Wendy is dragging Jack's body, a little hiccup there, into the storage room, the light switch is gone. There's another one that happens whenever Jack is entering Ullman's office for the first time for the interview. There wasn't a light switch underneath this painting that's on the wall there, but later whenever Jack is walking in to destroy the radio in Ullman's office to prevent Wendy and Danny from leaving the hotel, there appears a light switch down here.
Have you noticed that it's the two light switches? So, I mean, kind of connecting in with something that I saw in your trailer talking about the 11s, do you think that the two light switches are supposed to be 1 and 1 like 11, or do you think it might dive into more occult things where it's supposed to represent possibly like the two pillars?
Yeah, there's several 11s throughout the entire movie. I mean, pretty much a lot of the big open hallway doors look like they're double doors, which is representing 11. The room to 237 is double doors. The lights in behind Jack and Wendy within the movie look like 11s. You got the twins. There's also representing the 11. So there's 11s all through the movie that is baked in. And one of the ones that this one's really interesting, that in the establishing shot of the Overlook, which was shot at Timberline Lodge in Oregon, the exterior shots, and the rest were shot on a set in England. Look at this top photo here, this top panel. There's not a maze in the background. And then later on, of course, we know that there is a maze in the background, and people can say, "Oh, well, there wasn't really a maze in the establishing shot because there wasn't a maze at in Oregon at the Timberline Lodge," which they are correct. There isn't a maze at the Stanley Hotel either, though they did put a maze, like a little tiny maze, in the front of the hotel because of the popularity of The Shining. But still a continuity error. Okay, a continuity error is a mistake within a movie that something appears that wasn't there before. So regardless that there wasn't a maze in the establishing shot because this was an actual hotel in Oregon, it doesn't matter because there's a maze later on in the movie, and the maze is a very integral part of the entire movie.
Do you think that's supposed to represent like the mind, almost like the maze of like breaking down the mind, possibly? Because it seems like obviously once he starts kind of getting involved in the mind control aspect, that's when the maze pops up. So maybe it kind of is symbolically supposed to represent like the maze of breaking down the mind.
That's right. And what is Danny doing at the end of the movie? He's retracing his steps, just like it's to be able to to get away from Jack when he's trying to kill him with an axe. And like, what do several MK Ultra victims talk about? They have to retrace their steps. They have to go back in their mind. They have to dissect what they went through to figure out what happened to them and who did what to them. Danny is essentially doing the same thing within The Shining by retracing his steps and to get away from Jack, to hide from Jack. And this one's a foreshadowing one within The Shining, which is Jack's tie looks almost identical to the hedge maze, which Stanley Kubrick does so many of these foreshadowing events within The Shining. This is one that several people have already pointed out. The sticker disappearing on Danny's door, Dopey of the Seven Dwarfs. Whenever Danny's in the bathroom, there's a sticker of Dopey from the Seven Dwarfs on the door to his room. And then whenever the doctor comes to visit Wendy and Danny at the apartment, the sticker has disappeared. This one is the dialogue continuity error that I was bringing up earlier when within the Shining, whenever Wendy says that the Jack hurt Danny's arm 5 months ago and that he stopped drinking since then, and Jack has been sober for 5 months. And then when Jack is talking to Lloyd, the bartender, to tell him about what exactly had happened, he said that it was 3 years ago. This one's really interesting. This is a Kool-Aid that's on top of the fridge, which the Jim Jones incident just happened 2 years before the Shining came out, which would mean that they were, that whole Jim Jones incident had to do with the Kool-Aid and them all drinking, the Kool-Aid, so to speak. And the Shining was being shot during that time and being put together during that time. So maybe Kubrick put in the Kool-Aid as a symbolic reference there.
Just to connect another thing too with that too. I mean, obviously a lot of people that dig into a lot of those cults link them to a lot of MK Ultra mind control concepts, and it actually being like somewhat of like a psyop. So I mean, that could also be kind of a connection with that, basically saying that like these occult groups are actually psyopted and part of MK Ultra experiments. I mean,
yeah, that's absolutely right. That could definitely be symbolically. You're right in saying that a lot of the cults have been. Because a lot of them started popping up like right during the time that these the CIA's MK Ultra programs were going on.
Two birds, one stone. One, you can see if you can manipulate a group, and on the other side, you also break people away from this idea of commune living, because you don't want people to be living off on their own. You want them to be dependent on the government. So if you demonize the whole idea about people forming their own little breakaway societies and get the idea in everybody's head that it's a cult, if you're living in a breakaway society, then two birds, one stone. You're controlling people, and you're also scaring people away from breaking away from modern civilization.
That's how they do it. Many levels, several levels to the entire operation. This one's a clear plastic tarp that can be seen on the set of Danny driving his tricycle around the overlook. Right here at the top, there's this foliage, which looks like set tarp. That was probably used for some of the sets, which is interesting that no one, seen this. Kubrick being a perfectionist, how he is, and nobody thought to, scrub this scene from it because it has this plastic set tarp in the background. This one's a really famous one that many people have already pointed out, which is the chair disappearing behind Jack, and then it reappears. So Jack is talking to Wendy in this scene in the lobby of the hotel, and he's supposedly out there, writing his novel this entire time. And there's a chair that's behind Jack, and then the scene cuts to Wendy, and then it goes back to Jack, and the chair and the table have disappeared, and then it goes to Wendy again, and then when it cuts back to Jack, the table and chair has appeared again. That's a really wild one. That's one of the only ones that has something there disappear and then reappear all in the same shot.
This kind of stuff almost seems like, I know everybody kind of has their different opinions on the Mandela effect, and a lot of people connected in with all timelines being altered, all of that kind of stuff. But I, a lot of the time, fall back into this idea that I think it's a government psyop to see what information they can manipulate and what people's memories will actually remember and what they can manipulate. And I don't know, I keep getting the vibes from this stuff that it's almost subconscious of that. Like, it's like early steps to like this whole Mandela effect operation to see if you can do small things and alter them to see if anybody will notice. And in turn, you can make people feel like they're crazy if one person remembers it one way and one person remembers it another way. Because it's like somebody can watch this movie and remember the chair, and another one can watch it and not remember the chair. So I almost feel like this is reminiscent of like the early days of like what the more literal theory is on the Mandela effect.
Yeah, and that seems like also the setup that you were talking about with the Grateful Dead as well. I mean, the psychological operations like that also influence a lot of these theories too, and because people aren't told exactly what's going on, so therefore they create their own theories based off because they don't have all the information. This one is an interesting one, which is between Ullman and Jack. It's another dialogue error, which is a small dialogue error, but it's still interesting nonetheless. So basically, Jack says to Ullman, 5 months of peace is just what I need up here at the Overlook because I'm a writer, and this will give me time to write my book, when he should have said 7 months of peace because the hotel is closed for 7 months out of the year and open for 5. So that's a small dialogue error, but I still thought it was interesting to include. There's a lot of sexual innuendo within The Shining. Whenever Jack comes in to greet Ullman and shake his hand, the paper tray on the desk and makes it look like that Ullman is getting a hard-on. There's more sexual innuendo with the teddy bear in the background. This is a shot of Danny and Wendy before Wendy goes downstairs to confront Jack with the baseball bat. There's a teddy bear in the background. There's a fire truck next to it. The fire truck's ladder is sticking up, giving the appearance that the teddy bear has a hard-on. But right beside this teddy bear, too, is where Wendy grabs the bat off of the back of the couch, which a lot of people kind of miss the scene. I watched this so many times, and I didn't even realize that that's where she finds the baseball bat is, where she gets the baseball bat is on the couch next to this boner teddy bear. But there's another foreshadowing event of the baseball bat, which is in the first 10 minutes of the movie when the doctor is coming to examine Danny. Up here in the right-hand corner, there's looks like this cartoon character that has a baseball bat in their hand. And then whenever Jack goes to look at the model of the maze, which is one of the most infamous scenes of The Shining because it's so different from anything else that Stanley Kubrick really does within the movie, is when Jack goes to the model of the maze inside of the hotel, and then the model of the maze fades into the real shot of Danny and Wendy outside. And right before he goes to look at the model of the maze, he glances to the right. You can see him looking at the right. And right there on the couch is the baseball bat. He looks directly at the baseball bat before he goes and looks at the maze. It's sitting on the couch. And then all of a sudden, the baseball bat is upstairs in their apartment. And this is where Wendy picks it up off of this couch.
So just out of curiosity, there's a lot of obviously like foreshadowing of the baseball bat, and everybody knows the main scene with the baseball bat, but at least from like your breakdown and research, is there another meaning to the baseball bat and why they keep foreshadowing it? Like, what's the connection with the baseball bat other than like the end main scene with the baseball bat?
Well, there's Kubrick is a genius in foreshadowing things. Like a few slides later, he also foreshadows the teddy bear scene, which I have in a few slides later on. But when you watch the movie, it's like Wendy doesn't even really know how to handle this. She has both of her hands like midway up on the baseball bat, like that. She's not even in like a threatening position. She's like, wanting to like use it as defense. And then whenever she hits Jack, and then Jack goes down the steps, and then she drags Jack's body to the storage room. So, and then there's a lot of things with, Shelley Duvall's acting within the movie that Kubrick was really hard on her for. I don't think that Kubrick thought that Shelley Duvall was a very good actor for what he wanted her to portray in this movie. I mean, there's several scenes in the behind the scenes of The Shining where Kubrick is just laying into her, and it was like, you look fake if you're jumping on every emphatic line that Jack Nicholson does, like, and you're reacting to it. It's like it's looking fake, and you're wasting everyone's time. So obviously, Kubrick did not like Shelley Duvall's acting, and it basically ruined her entire career.
I mean, is that necessarily the case, or knowing how intelligent and how much he mapped all this stuff out, do you think he picked exactly who he wanted, and he was also trying to conduct another experiment of basically like traumatizing her while doing this movie to see what the end result might be? Like, I almost feel like there's a reason why he was yelling at her and all this stuff. Like, I feel like he thinks on a deeper level than just, I didn't want this actress. Because if that was the case, he was such a perfectionist, he would have just replaced her at that point. Like, he had an intention for picking her and giving her the psychological trauma that he did while filming this movie.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's where she picks up the baseball bat, which is next to the teddy bear off the couch up in their apartment when she was next to Danny. This was another really interesting continuity error within The Shining, which was the first time that Danny sees room 237. There's a door in the background, and he looks at room 237, and then in the next scene, the door in the background on the right is open. So it's shut, and it cuts away, then the door is open. This one is one that people have pointed out several times over and over. It's actually in Jay's previous two films. The carpet changing when Danny stands up in the hallway. So in one scene, whenever Danny is standing there, there's the open-facing hexagonal carpet pattern. And then in the next scene, it's a closed-facing hexagonal carpet pattern. And people have said that, well, Kubrick just turned him around on the carpet, which he probably did. That's probably what he did, but it's a continuity error. I don't think people understand what a continuity error is.
You wouldn't do that intentionally, knowing that, again, what a perfectionist he was. Like, there was intention behind it, like it's such an obvious one that, in modern day films, it's like somebody leaves a coffee cup somewhere, but like, this guy's thinking on a whole other level, and people need to take that into consideration. He doesn't think like the average person.
You want to know what a mistake is? A mistake is that episode of Game of Thrones where the freaking Starbucks coffee cup mug can be seen in there. That's a mistake. That's something that was not intentional, that they accidentally put in there. That got past all these people's views. Stuff like this is the carpet changing is intentional. That's 100% intentional. Like, there's nothing out of place. He just did it differently. And we know that from the Game of Thrones thing, because they ended up going back and changing that episode and editing out the Starbucks coffee cup that was seen in that scene. This is another foreshadowing event. So whenever the doctor visits Danny and Wendy at their apartment in Boulder, there's so many Easter eggs and so many good things in like the first 10 minutes of the movie, dude. It's like insane. And people think that part of the movie is like the most boring part of the movie because there's just characters talking, but it's incredible, all the things that are in there. And we've covered a lot of them so far. But whenever the doctor comes to visit Danny and she's examining him on his bed, there's a teddy bear that he's laying on, which resembles the teddy bear that Wendy later sees after she had been traumatized by Jack trying to kill her with an axe.
I want to break down that scene real quick because I'm sure you have a totally different perspective. One, well, it's going to be a two-part question. One is the whole
might not
like
be able to answer it. I don't know.
Is the whole bear scene in the book itself, and two, what do you think might be like the reason for the bear scene if it wasn't something that Stephen King included in the book?
That's what I can't answer. Not because I don't know, but because no one would watch the movie if I told you. Kubrick, Stephen King had several. If you watch Stephen King's remake of the movie, because he remade it, he did a TV series on it, a TV miniseries with his verified version of how he wanted The Shining to actually be, and it's freaking god awful. It's a mess. It's laughable. I couldn't even watch it. I couldn't even get through it. It's just the acting is so cheesy. The thing, like haunted bushes, like the maze is like a haunted maze where like the bushes turn into creatures and then like go after the characters in this Shining TV series. And there's
so he just took The Shining as a cover and he didn't intend to use it.
Yeah, there's a Wolfman in Stephen King's work. I'm pretty sure that, can't quote me on it because I didn't even watch the Stephen King version of the movie. I probably should have, but it was just such garbage. I couldn't sit through it. I don't know how anybody could be happy with that. But it was filmed at the Stanley, so there's that. They got that claim to fame. They prop up Stephen King. I've been there several times, and they prop up Stephen King like he's a god up there, which the proud of that. He hated the Stanley Kubrick's version of The Shining, and that they because Kubrick kind of had them fooled. Not really had them fooled. I don't think he really had any intention of filming The Shining at the Stanley Hotel. He just sent people, researchers and people, to scout out areas to see what he would like to build his set of in The Shining in England. But I think people got confused by that and thought that he was going to come in and film the movie at the Stanley Hotel, which I don't think he ever had any intention of doing that. He was in Europe during that whole time. He after 2001: A Space Odyssey, he never came back to the United States. So I don't know why anybody thought that he was going to come and film it at the Stanley, but Stephen King filmed his version at the Stanley. But it's so if people have seen that, they know that it's like complete garbage. And the Stanley still uses a lot of the things from Stanley Kubrick's movies, like they'll have the carpet pattern stuff in the store, and they still use the iconic thing from The Shining and stuff, but they do nothing but prop up Kubrick's version. Stephen King's version of The Shining. This one gets into moon landing stuff, the Tang. That's the other people have pointed this out. The Tang in the background,
next to the Kool-Aid again.
Yep, double, baby. Kool-Aid and Tang. You got to drink that Kool-Aid to believe in that moon landing, baby. And Tang was was popularized by the astronauts because they would it made the water taste better, and Tang kind of blew up around that time, and all the astronauts would do nothing but drink Tang, and it was known as the astronaut drink, the space drink.
I think we're the last generation that had that stuff, because I remember back when we were kids, because I'm guessing you're around the same age as me, that they had all the commercials with the orangutan drinking Tang. I think we're like the last generation that really like had access to this stuff.
The orangutan drinking Tang. Yeah, I remember those commercials. Yeah, they were, but that's how Tang got super popular. And this movie came out in 1980, so that would have been 21 years after the moon landing. Yeah, 21 years. Then we already discussed this. Danny is standing up in the hallway having the Apollo 11 shirt on, walking into room 237. Kubrick changed the room number from 217 in Stephen King's novel to room 237. It was said that the moon was 237,000 miles away from the Earth at that point. This is the Shining Toy Story reference. The director of Toy Story is a really big fan of The Shining. Even the wallpaper in this shot of Toy Story looks like the shiny carpet.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back. But before we get into this break, if you might be interested in joining a growing community of like-minded individuals, then pop on over to the Open Minds Media Telegram, a place to discuss high strangeness, conspiracies, and anything else on your mind. Bizarre and open-minded individuals always welcome. Link to join available down in the show description. And we are back, so let's get back to it.
This one's interesting, which is one that people have pointed out already. That a lot of the TVs and appliances within The Shining doesn't appear to be plugged into anything. And my theory on this is if you did fake the Apollo moon landing, which there's a lot of evidence that the footage itself is staged in fake footage, regardless if we actually went to the moon or not, the footage is probably not real footage, and quite possibly could have been filmed by Stanley Kubrick, because during that time that we were planning on going to the moon, he was also making 2001: A Space Odyssey. So it's very likely that he could have just filmed some extra scenes within 2001: A Space Odyssey, which was using high budget special effects that had never been seen before in movies, and then use that bonus extra scene as the footage of the moon landing. And he's trying to tell people by having these TVs and appliances within The Shining not being plugged into a visible power source, because the footage that people thought were live during the moon landing was actually pre-recorded footage that he filmed.
See, my theory on that I've always kind of fell behind is, regardless of if people think we actually made it to the moon or not, no matter what, I feel like there would have been fake footage filmed, because during that, it was during the Cold War, it was during the space race with like Russia and everything, and we didn't want them to beat us to the moon. So regardless if we were going to make it or not, we were going to have fake footage so that the rest of the world in Russia would believe that we were the ones that originally made it there. So it's like
we would be under the perception that we actually went, regardless if we did or not. And that's what I think he's trying to get across with symbolically making these TVs not plugged into anything, because you would be given the perception that you're watching people on the moon when you're really not. And you're getting the perception that Danny and Wendy is watching something on these TVs when they're really not.
What's just out of curiosity too, it looks like the bottom one looks like it's like maybe like a newscast or something. I'm not sure what the top one is, but if the bottom one's a newscast and maybe the top one's supposed to be something that's live, it seems like there could be like a whole other level to that's showing that it's like something live, but it's not actually live.
Yeah, the movie in the top one is Summer of people are going to kill me. I can't remember the name of the movie, but it was Summer of something. But yeah, that would make sense if because we know that, which is another really strange thing within the movie, is that whenever Wendy calls the police from the Overlook out of Ullman's office earlier in the movie, and then whenever Halloran calls the police later on in the movie to check on the family up at the Overlook, the police act as if they didn't even know anybody was up there, which is a really strange coincidence. Like they were like, "Oh yeah, we'll try and call up there and see what's going on," when they had just a few days prior gotten a call from Wendy, so they knew that she was up there. And then whenever Halloran calls, they act like they didn't even know. So it's really strange and weird, that coincidence as well. So this is the one where Ullman is saying that the previous caretaker of the hotel was named Charles Grady, and then whenever Grady is talking to Jack, whenever they meet face to face, he calls himself Delbert Grady. This one's really wild. This is a really wild one. What do you see that's different about the... Okay, I'll explain it.
I was going to say the entire room and everything looks like it's different, or the doors flipped on another way if they're changing the camera angle around.
even if they change the camera angle around, it doesn't change the side of the door that the handle is on.
Yeah, because it opens up the same way. Yeah, you're right.
So in this top panel picture, there's looks like there's the kitchen is in the background. You got a black chalkboard in the background of the wall. You got this table here with looks like dishes and water cup holders here, and the handle to this is the scene where Halloran is showing them the freezer room. So whenever Halloran and the door handle is on the right side. So this is right before they walk into the freezer room. And this second panel down here at the bottom is of when they walk out of the freezer room. So this is the exact same scene. So when they walk out of the freezer room, the door handle is on the opposite side of where it was. It's now on the left side, not the right side. So even if they shot it from the other side, it doesn't change the angle of where the door handle is. The background is completely different. You got two double doors. Those are the two double doors that I was talking about earlier, you know, like the 11 type of symbolism. You got two double doors. You got this fire alarm on the top of the wall. You have a window here. You have a mirror right here, and like what looks like switches, like to a switchboard here. And this dispenser thing was probably like throwaway hazardous material or something. But the set is completely different. It's the exact same scene. They walk into the freezer room. It's one set, and then they walk out of the freezer room, and it's a completely different set.
See, this could tie into what we were talking about earlier, that room is supposed to be where everything starts at. So maybe it's a matter of like the experiment has started once they enter that room, so they never like actually maybe like exit that room if they're conducting some type of psychological experiment. But I don't know, I feel like it ties into something with like that the perception is altered after they've entered this room.
And here's some Beatles symbolism that people have pointed out before. The Beatles Abbey Road album artwork cover from 1969, and then Allman taking Jack, Wendy, and Bill Watson, giving them a tour of the outside of the Overlook. They are all like walking in the exact same way as the Beatles Abbey Road artwork. So also within The Shining, Kubrick changed the color of the red Volkswagen Beetle that Jack is supposed to drive. It was red in Stephen King's novel, and then Kubrick changed it to yellow. And then later on, whenever Halloran is driving up to the Overlook from Florida, he gets a flight into Denver, which I don't really understand how he gets a flight into Denver. The newscaster was saying that all flights were canceled, but he somehow magically got a flight. And as he's on the flight, everything is like super sunny and like bright out. Like it wouldn't be that way in the middle of a snowstorm. But regardless, he ends up in traveling up the mountain to the hotel. And then there's a red Volkswagen Beetle that's crushed underneath this 18-wheeler, which many people have described as, you know, a jab at Stephen King's work. And also in the background of the Abbey Road artwork, there's a white Volkswagen Beetle, which was John Lennon's Beetle as well. And Stephen King got the inspiration to name his novel The Shining by John Lennon's song called Instant Karma, which in the song they say, we all shine on. And that's how he got the inspiration to name the book The Shining. This is the big one. So when we first meet Danny and Wendy in The Shining, Wendy is reading a book by an intelligence officer, J.D. Salinger, called Catcher in the Rye. In less than a year after the release of The Shining, John Lennon was assassinated by Mark David Chapman, and on the scene, he was reading Catcher in the Rye. He shot John Lennon, sat on the curb, opened up Catcher in the Rye, and started reading it. The police showed up. During his prosecution, he stood up as his defense and said, if you want to know the reason why I did this, and all you got to do is read Catcher in the Rye. And then later on, whenever a psychologist was going to visit Mark David Chapman in prison, a couple of years later, he was still reading Catcher in the Rye. And this is also the case with John Hinckley Jr., which was the attempted assassination on Ronald Reagan, less than a year of the release of The Shining. That was also found on the scene, which is a really strange coincidence because John Hinckley Jr. is out of prison now. And he has a YouTube channel where he talks about folk music.
So The Catcher in the Rye, like what's the... I'm sure you've dived into it a bit. What's the book supposed to be? Is it supposed to like be some type of like mental operation that like pushes people to attack like one of their idols or something? Like what have you broken down with The Catcher in the Rye?
Well, many people have, came to the conclusion that this book is some sort of MK Ultra Manchurian style candidate assassination trigger.
So it's like certain people who read it who have had this psychological operation done to them, it'll like activate them essentially, or it's something that actually like works at somebody so that they can be initiated.
They can be more susceptible to the types of programming. And Jack is a writer within the movie. It's established that he's supposed to be writing this book over and over and over again. So it's under the presumption that this is Jack's book because this is taking place at their apartment in Boulder, Colorado. So Catcher in the Rye is more than likely Jack's book, and he's previously read it. And then throughout the movie, he's being programmed to. When you look at the book as a MK Ultra Manchurian style candidate assassination trigger, and what is Jack doing throughout the movie? He's trying to kill his family.
What happened to the person that originally wrote The Catcher in the Rye? Like, I don't know when that book originally was like released, but just out of curiosity, do you know?
Well, J.D. Salinger became like a really big, like recluse, sort of exactly like Stanley Kubrick and Jack Nicholson.
See, because I'm almost kind of curious if they were trying to like almost say like this was what was supposed to happen to this person or something possibly. Like I feel like there's another reason why there's like a tie in there, like thinking on that deeper level, like Stanley Kubrick.
Well, Joe Atwell within our movie gives a solid breakdown of exactly his interpretation of what he believes Catcher in the Rye is about. And I don't want to spoil that for people because it's a really big, important part of the entire movie. But here's another continuity error within The Shining 2, which is when Wendy and Danny are trying to hide from Jack going into the bathroom. There's a lampshade on the table that is crooked, and then whenever Jack enters, breaks down that first door into the apartment that they're staying at in the Overlook Hotel, the lampshade is then straight. This is another really interesting one. It's a hard catch for people to actually notice, which is when Jack is trying to break down the door to the bathroom. We only see him break down one of the quarter panels to the door. And he sticks his head through and utters the famous line, "Here's Johnny." And whenever he hears Howler and Snowmobile start to pull up to the hotel, and he turns around, the other quarter panel of the door has been destroyed. When we only see him break down one side of the quarter panel of the door.
See, this thing is either going in 2s or it's 11s because, again, the light switches, all of this stuff, it goes in the pairs, or, again, they seem to be elongated objects like the light switches, whatever. Could it be also representations of 11, or is it something involving 2? I mean, it could be interpreted either way, I guess.
Absolutely. And this is a banger one, too, which explains really the entire movie. And I wasn't the first person to see this, but I was the person that I believe interpreted what this poster means correctly, which is when Danny first sees the twins. The first thing that happens that's in any way, shape, or form strange in the hotel is when they first arrive there and Danny's playing in the games room and he's throwing darts at the board and he turns around and he sees the twins. Well, there's this poster in the background, which appears to have a skier on it, and below that says the word monarch. So I'm just going to leave that one there. Please don't ask me any questions about it.
I know what you're hitting at. All right, I caught that one as soon as I saw monarch, but
Yeah, and then this one also correlates as well. This is something that another person has pointed out, which is other people have seen. It was shown in the movie Room 237, which is at the end of the movie when the faraway shots fades to the close-up shot of Jack Nicholson. In the bottom quarter panel here, you can see that there appears to be a tiny little Hitler mustache beginning to form on Jack's face, which then leads to the thing that I found within The Shining, which is in the background of the gold room whenever Allman is giving a tour to Jack and Wendy. There's a Nazi swastika that's baked into the wall, into the back of the gold room.
Stay tuned, guys. This is our last break. But if you guys enjoyed the show and think I deserve it, please leave a review or rating for the show on iTunes or Spotify. Your continued support is what makes this show possible, and your opinions go a long way to help the show grow and improve. So thank you. Now back with that deep conversation you crave.
So that's it. I hope you guys really enjoyed that one, and hope you liked the little presentation there, and it inspired you to go watch my movie on Amazon Prime, A Clockwork Shining.
Man, I'm excited to actually go and find this now because, like I said in the beginning of the show, man, you just have like a different perspective on the way that you break things down, and everybody hyper focuses on all of the moon landing stuff with The Shining. So it's nice to see a new, refreshing outlook on what the possible meaning of The Shining is, and it definitely seems like there's definitely a little bit of the lunar landing stuff, but it seems like the primary focus of it is what you guys were diving into, and I'm surprised nobody else has seen it because it's like a lot of the occult stuff, like it's hidden in plain sight, and as soon as you know what to look for, it's just piece after piece after piece after piece, and it seems like that's what happened with you guys, is that everybody overlooked this thing, and then as soon as you guys found one piece, you just started finding piece after piece after piece, and absolutely fascinating, man.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Once I realized exactly what was going on within the movie, then I started realizing, I'm like, holy crap, this is exactly what's going on. And then when you relate all of those to other things within the movie, it all completely makes sense. All of it makes 100% complete sense. No other theory makes The Shining make sense. You can always like poke holes in anybody's theory about The Shining, but this one is very difficult to poke holes in because it explains all of it. It explains the person, the bear costume, and the gentleman upstairs, and like all of that. It makes it perfect to where it completely makes sense. But again, whenever you watch the movie, you have to, put that stuff together on your own and listen to what we're saying in our movie. And then once you understand exactly what it is, what we're saying, then you'll never see The Shining again, the same way again.
Say one thing, I can't say it enough on this. I don't think that people understand the depth of how intricately Stanley Kubrick thought about things or thought about his films or did anything. So most people are coming at it from the perspective of looking at it like a normal person, but you guys really got within the mind of Kubrick to really understand like what he was trying to do. And I feel like there's a lot more that you guys are going to end up uncovering the more you guys go through this film. And I'm excited to see what more you guys end up bringing up. And if this whole thing possibly even connects even further into some of his movies, like assumably there's a reason why the movies fell in the order that he did. And I'm excited to see where you guys end up with the research, because I feel like you guys are going to keep going down that path, and you guys are just going to find more connections, and you guys are going to unlock, for lack of better terms, the code to Kubrick.
Well, speaking of 11s, The Shining was Kubrick's 11th film.
And again, does that 11 go into two different things? Is it 11, or is it supposed to represent the two pillars and then it goes back into occult things? Like there's so many different interpretations, even just within the 11.
So much 11 symbolism in there.
Man. So if anybody, I'm going to do this ahead of time before we get into the words of wisdom, just because I really want to make sure everybody goes and figures out where to watch this movie at. Why don't you let everybody know again where exactly they can find your documentary?
You can find it on Amazon Prime, A Clockwork Shining, Kubrick's Odyssey 3, but you can just type in A Clockwork Shining and you'll get the same result. Or if you want to type in Kubrick's Odyssey 3, it'll also pop up. It'll be the first one on there. And if you can't get it, if you're listening in a country that it's not available, you can also get it on Apple TV Plus as well.
And just out of curiosity too, just because I always have to ask this one too, do you guys have a direct website where people might be able to buy like an MP3 copy or something like that? Because I know a lot of people out there, they may not have Prime, they may not have iTunes, but they definitely want to be able to see this movie. Do you guys have like another option where people might be able to purchase like an MP3 copy or something of it, or an MP4 copy or something?
We're working on getting it up on a site where anybody can purchase it here really soon. So people will be able to get it worldwide, no matter where they are, and they won't have to have an Amazon account or be subscribed to Apple TV Plus. So we're working on that. It should be up on a site where everyone can watch it by the end of the month.
Oh, perfect. So if anybody wants to go and make sure that they're able to keep track on that, don't forget to go and follow Ryder and all of the fantastic stuff that he does on all of the social medias. But we'll get into where you can find all those links in a second. But before we do that, of course, I still like to end the show with words of wisdom. So if there's any words of wisdom that you could bestow on the listeners today, man, what might it be?
Things are not always the way that they're perceived on the surface level. There's normally many hidden meanings, especially in certain people's work. They like to hide things and put things in a way that isn't visible to the normal naked eye. And it's only when you see all of these relating factors and you put them all together that you realize exactly what's going on. Thank you for having me on, brother. Really appreciate it. And I hope people will go out and really support this movie. It's completely independent. It's an independent movie. I put it all together myself, and Jay Widener is the producer on the movie. I directed it and edited it and put it all together. So please go out there and support independent filmmakers. If you're constantly complaining about Hollywood and all these stupid movies that are out, like all the remakes and the sequels and the prequels and the requels and the recognizable IP that they always are constantly doing all the time, then this is your opportunity to support people that don't have those big contracts with people. And not only when you do that, you're also supporting any future projects that I may be involved in. So thank you.
Ain't that the truth, man? I can't say it enough. Always support independent media, because independent media is going to give you exactly what your niche might be, because the mainstream stuff is always going to be a for everybody type of scenario. So if you guys enjoy this stuff that's almost specialized for you, always support independent media. And on top of that, talking about independent media, not only do you do these awesome documentaries, but I know you run a podcast and you guys do a bunch of other stuff. So where can everybody find all your other work on the internet? Where can they find you? And where can they find your podcast and any other things that you might be working on?
You can find me on Raised by Giants on YouTube and any and all podcast platforms. And if you'd like to reach out to me personally, you can follow me on Twitter X at Raised by Giants 8, and on Instagram at Raised by Giants Pod. And just to follow up your quote there, this movie is, even if you don't like Stanley Kubrick, maybe you've never even seen The Shining. I actually had a gentleman that had me on a show that had never seen The Shining until I sent him my documentary to watch. And then he started The Shining. He watched the first half of The Shining. Then he watched my documentary, and then he finished the last half of The Shining. So regardless, if you don't like Stanley Kubrick, you don't like The Shining, there's so many different things within this movie. Like I said, we have 4 other people that are in the movie, including me and Jay Widener. We have Mark Devlin, which is a researcher and author. We have Walter Bosley, AFOSI, Air Force Special Agent. We have author and researcher Joe Atwell, and MK Ultra Monarch survivor Kathy O'Brien. And this movie really breaks down a lot of different topics. You're not only getting a story about Stanley Kubrick and about The Shining, which is the main focus of the movie, but you're also getting a history of the music industry. You're getting a history of the film industry, and you're getting a history of these clandestine CIA operations. So thank you. Appreciate you. Hopefully we can get a link in the description so people can easily find it. And thanks for having me on. I hope everyone enjoyed it.
Absolutely, man. I'll make sure I include that link down in the show description. And I always appreciate you making the time to come on the show, man. Share your research because, again, you do it from a totally different perspective, and I have great respect for the way you research, man.
Thank you, my friend. I really appreciate it.
If any of you guys out there want to get a hold of me for any reason whatsoever, possibly being a guest on the show, possibly even sharing an experience or an encounter, or even just simply having a conversation with me, you guys can get a hold of me through email, which is increaseourrealitypodcast@outlook.com, or you can guys get a hold of me through social media. Instagram and Facebook are the ones I'm the most active on, or you guys can contact me through the submission form, which is available on the Linktree, and that one will go directly to my email, or you guys can also call in or text the hotline, and that number is 313-364-1551. And if you guys have some free time, don't forget to go and check out the awesome friends of the show, I Know SQUATCH, Snarly Owl Natural Products, Crypto Theology, and Big Ape Threads, and our friends with affiliate links, Dimension Devices, Oregon-ite, and Sticker Mule, with additional discounts and credits available. More information on those are available, of course, down in the show description. And every single thing that I mentioned throughout the show is all available on the Linktree, which is available down in the show description. And I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. I hope today's show has connected some dots in your own reality, and I'll catch you on the next one. Have a good night, everybody.
Reality isn't what it seems. I'm Dr. D's taking aboard a craft with a tractor beam. Is life a simulation or an astral dream? Aliens travel through black holes in different galaxies. Life is a bizarre odyssey, with a mic talking about philosophy. Well, Bigfoot is stalking campers as a Wendigo walks through the woods of sharpened antlers, using a Ouija board to talk to the dead like a necromancer. There's so many questions and not enough answers. So if you're interested in mysteries and abnormalities, tune in and listen to Inquiries of Our Reality. So if you're interested in mysteries and abnormalities,